us today. What a beautiful audience. Take a look around and see all the different types of people who are interested in this topic. We are very happy and grateful to have the honor of Dr. Vandana Shiva here with us tonight. She will be speaking to you in just a matter of moments, and indulge me in a few welcoming remarks. My name is Tessa Higgs Peterson. I am assistant professor here at Pitzer College, and I'm also director of the Center for California Cultural and Social Issues. The center's aim at Pitzer is to help facilitate and support Pitzer in some of its primary goals, which are to foster a community of social responsibility, intercultural understanding, and an interest in the implications of knowledge and action and the ethics that go along with the learning that takes place at this institution. We hope that the learning that takes place here is involved directly with addressing the social issues of our local communities and our global communities. And we feel that we are directly responsible, and it is our duty to interact and connect with all of the diverse issues of our local communities. And we hope that we do that well. Sometimes we falter, and sometimes we need a little inspiration, which leads us to today. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to learn from and be inspired from someone who has done tremendous work in our world and can help us learn about other ways in which we can activate our passions for social justice and put those passions to good use through strategies that are transforming the world. CCCSI is able to bring Dr. Vandana Shiva here tonight through a generous grant from the Weingart Foundation called the Changemakers Grant. It allows us to have speakers come to Pitzer about once a month, and we encourage you to come join us for all of those events. I want to give special thanks to the Changemaker Committee, especially to Deborah Lieberman, who has coordinated and put on all of our Changemaker events. Thank you, Debbie. Some general information, housekeeping. If anyone feels a little stuffed in here or needs a little more space, we do have overflow rooms where this is live webcasting at the room 108 just downstairs, and all the Pitzer Hall living room and the founder's room. So this is actually being broadcast to those other rooms because we can't fit all of you in this one space. The talk will be approximately an hour, and then we'll have a half an hour for Q&A. And so that will be moderated by Professor Melinda Harold Menzies. And so hold your questions till the end, and we will have time for them. Oops, is that okay? All right. After this, Dining for Democracy is holding a special dinner with Vandana Shiva, and if you were selected in the random lottery tickets that were selected for that dinner, that'll be taking place next door at the Shakedown. We do have evaluations that help us get this funding to hold these types of events. They are under the chairs of the first row, and we ask that if the people in the first row of these look under your chair, and you'll see the green evaluations. At the end, if you can pass them down to your fellow seat aisle sitters. This series is themed Learning to Live Responsibly in an Irresponsible Time, and we hope that you will enjoy today's event. So now a few words of introduction on Dr. Vandana Shiva. Born in India in 1952, Dr. Shiva is a physicist and philosopher of science who is deeply engaged in the ecological, social, and economic struggles of subsistence farmers in India. Her work is deeply interdisciplinary, drawing on indigenous knowledge systems, feminist gender studies, philosophy, physics, the hard sciences, environmental studies, postcolonial and deconstructionist theory, and much more. She holds a master's degree in philosophy of science and a PhD in particle physics. She started her work in biodiversity with the Chipko movement in the 1970s. Her contribution to activism around the study of forestry and water conservation has gone beyond critique with the launch of a people's program on biodiversity. In the past 10 years, she has built a new movement called Lavdanya, 9 Seeds, a movement for biodiversity conservation and farmers' rights in India. Its studies have validated the ecological value of traditional farming and have been instrumental in fighting destructive developmental projects in India and work to expose threats to the world's farmers that are caused by the potent combination of global liberalization of trade, and patent protection of agricultural processes and products. Shiva sees biodiversity as intimately linked to cultural diversity and knowledge diversity. For more than 15 years, she has been a campaigner on the ethical and ecological impacts of genetic engineering. She has led campaigns on biosafety and built citizens' responses to the introduction of genetically modified organisms, GMOs, in agriculture. Her research has been groundbreaking for food security issues and made her an important figure in putting pressure on the World Bank. She is a founding board member of the International Forum on Globalization, the citizens groups dedicated to monitoring and intervening on the impact of globalization. She is currently leading an international campaign on food rights for people's right to knowledge and food security. Director of the Research Foundation on Science, Technology, and Ecology, she is the author of many books, including Water Wars, Pollution, Profits, and Privatization, Biopiracy, The Blunder of Nature and Knowledge, Monocultures of the Mind, The Violence of the Green Revolution, and Staying Alive. We are very happy and grateful to have us here with us today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Thank you to the change makers and the generosity of the people who've enabled you to bring me here. It's these unknown solidarity links that is really making the change in the world. Much more impactful than the trillions of dollars being given in bailouts to banks, billions being given in loans by the World Bank. So I have a lot of gratitude for and hope in these small initiatives of linking us together to create responsibility in a world of deep irresponsibility. An irresponsibility that now has become so serious that if you project the scientific evidence, in 100 years, the human species could be wiped out on this planet. I mean, that's what the climate data is showing us. And the climate data is actually underestimated in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Because every process is taking place at much faster rates, whether it's the melting of the Arctic ice. I've just finished a 10-day climate pilgrimage through the Himalaya, which we call the third pole. The Himalaya is normally forgotten in the snow issue. You know, it's the Arctic and the Antarctic. People forget there's a part of the world which has a lot of snow, and that part of the world and that snow supports half of humanity. 40% very clearly depends on the water of the Himalayan rivers. And in the lean seasons, the only water available is the snow. And in deserts, like Ladakh or Tibet, it's only snowmelt that is a source of water. As part of this pilgrimage, I was in Ladakh, and there are villages that are already being washed away as snow changes to rain because of global warming. An area that never got rainfall, it's a desert, is now not getting enough snow to replenish the glaciers, but suddenly gets downpour. California, I didn't expect it to be raining, and I was told, you're going to California, there are landslides out there. And you know, the news of these disasters travels so much that if you come to India, you think everything is Bombay of November last year. Or there's a flood forever. You know, it's all about terrorism, floods. Interestingly, the droughts, in my view, are much more devastating. But because they're not sudden, they don't make the news ever. Even though droughts leave communities without water, this year we've had a total failure of the monsoon. If you know the Indian climate, our rain comes in the monsoon. Comes in June, and it ends in September. This year, less than 10, 20, 30% according to where you were of the monsoon came. And when I traveled the drought-stricken districts of northern India, I could see the paddies at the end of August waiting to be transplanted, and they hadn't been transplanted. And then in end of September, when we should be having sunshine and the harvest is ready and you need warm temperature and good sunlight to dry your grain, we started to have downpours and floods in South India. So I call climate change climate chaos, because change makes people feel it's very predictable. And the two problems with predictable change is, first, if it changes slightly, everyone starts to say, oh, it's not global warming, it's global cooling, because this year we had extra snow. But the other thing that sense of, oh, it will just be 2 degrees more everywhere in the world, you get environmental skeptics like Bjorn Lomborg, who's written a fat book to say there's no ecological crisis. He's a Danish. I wouldn't call him an environmentalist. He basically spends all his time saying there's no crisis. And he said a while ago, but it'll be very good, because now for the Scandinavians and the Nordic countries, we're going to be out on our beaches all year long. Forgetting that what is happening is a total scrambling of the way this amazing planet of which we are a part has organized itself and given us the seasons, and how the seasons have sustained life. And it was predictable when the rain would come. We even have a calendar for farmers. It's called the Pancham, which predicts exactly when you'll have a shower. It predicts the year you'll have somewhat low rainfall. I've been trying to find learned people to tell me whether those predictions are still working with all this climate chaos. But I would say climate chaos is a result of climate irresponsibility. It's a result of climate injustice. Because the islanders who are facing drowning did not cause it. Those communities in the hill areas, I've spent my life with communities in my region of the Himalaya. I come from a state in India which is called Uttarakhand, the mountain state. And that's where the Chipko movement started in the 70s. As a young student like you, I became a volunteer in it and became their scribe, started to write their reports. And eventually we did get a logging ban in 1981 after 10 years of direct action by the women. And the action was so beautiful, because the women would say, we'll hug the trees, and if you want to cut the tree and kill the tree, you have to first kill us. Because these trees and forests are our mothers. They provide us water, they provide us fuel, they provide us fodder. And deforestation is causing disaster. Deforestation is making us walk long distances for water. It's making us walk longer for fuel, wood and energy. And whenever they tried to build more roads, women would protest that too, because it led to more landslides. And I remember they would joke and say, we just need our bus number 11, which is our feet. Yeah. Our 2 feet. Now, that's how the Himalayan communities function. Maybe a few mules, but mainly walking. You can't have roads all over those high mountaintops. And they are suffering. Their water is disappearing. Just completed a participatory study with communities on what climate change is doing to their resources. When we dealt with the deforestation in the 70s, women were having to walk 2 to 3 miles for water. Now they're walking 10 miles and spending 12 hours getting 1 pot filled, because the streams have become a trickle. Because the rain isn't coming and is not able to recharge the streams and the springs. first time in my life in my region, I have seen children having to go for water collection because the mothers don't have enough time. So the minute school finishes, the kids will throw their bags at home and run to sit at a stream, trickle by trickle, drop by drop, collecting water. We are seeing our communities annihilated by the action of those who would not give up fossilized ways. I call the fossil-based civilization not just a civilization based on fossil fuels, fuels that were meant to be under the earth. That's why the earth put them down there. She didn't make them available and say, take it. She's so generous. You know, she puts our fruit trees above, she gives us water above, but she put the oil and the coal deep down there and said, hands off. But do you think greed and hubris would allow that? We've got an entire oil-based civilization. And that oil-based civilization is based, in my view, a bit also on fossilized mines, not just on fossil fuels. I mean, there are times when you just feel something has lived its life. And an industrial, mechanical worldview that assumes that the resources of the earth are just for grabbing by the powerful, that assumes that you don't have to be responsible for the pollution you cause and the abuse you cause, someone else can bear the cost, is a civilization based on irresponsibility. Till those who take an action have to bear the consequences, you will always have a civilization based on irresponsibility. But this civilization is also turning this irresponsibility into a genocidal and ecocidal act. And I'm not using those words lightly. It's killing freedoms. What's the freedom that people want? What's the freedom species want? To stay alive, that's the highest freedom. Just to have well-being and to stay alive and to have that tiny bit of ecological space on the planet to meet your needs, renew yourself, and have a future. That's all. The ecological space is abundant. Gandhi put it very clearly. He said, the earth gives enough for everyone's needs, but she does not give enough for a few people's greed. That with greed we run short, no matter how much we have. I grew up in India where you could travel the length and breadth, whether it was the deserts or the semi-arid tracts, of course the wet areas, and water was available at 10 feet everywhere. Because the only way we used to get water out of the earth was through renewable systems, through renewable energy. Either human power, lovely designs, absolutely ingenious and innovative, where, you know, with a pedal you just touch one end of a fulcrum and it goes down, picks up a bucket of water, which you then use for your irrigation. Never ran out of water and had enough water to irrigate, enough water to drink, enough water for the animals. In the 70s, the World Bank said this is primitive. We'll give you loans to make deep tube wells. I think it was in 1972 that there was a drought in the peninsula India, in what's called the Deccan Plateau. And the government of India wanted just a little more loans to be able to deepen the wells, you know, these open wells, where all you needed to do was go 1 foot deeper and you'd have water. And the bank said, no, you cannot have water for deepening wells to 1 foot. You must go to 100 feet with energized pumps that run on diesel or electricity. And you must change your agricultural pattern. You must give up the millets that use 250 millimeters of water. You must grow sugarcane. that uses 2,500 millimeters of water. Because the World Bank lends money on the logic of getting returns on investment. So it gives you loans, and then it expects you to get into export-oriented cash crop economies so that you can earn dollars and pay back the loans. But the problem is, for every action of increasing the cash crops, you have deep poverty and deep degradation of nature. Yeah, it was sort of booming off and on, wasn't it? And of course, I didn't suspect there was a terrorist sitting in there. Just be one tiny electrical fault that your magical hands would sort out. You now have entire villages with no water. The biodiversity and food security of people has been destroyed. And even the exports haven't been established, because now India is importing sugar. Because it's not about who produces how much, it's about who can subsidize how much to dump on someone else. That's what happened with Mexico. I'm looking at this beautiful, the mural's gone. But, you know, the corn in the mural. I remember the Zapatista uprising in '94. 2 million peasants overnight lost their livelihood because cheap corn was dumped. And then last year, that same corn started to make its way because of another set of subsidies to run cars and become biofuel. And first the peasants were destroyed, and then the food security was destroyed because a Mexican has lower purchasing power than an automobile owner. And of course you have a third diversion of food right now into animal prisons. I think a year ago I was driven from Santa Cruz campus to Los Angeles. And they drove me through this area where you have almond plantations with nobody. And they ship these bees from the other end of the continent. And you have these things. When I said, what's that? It looked like prisons from outside. And they said, CAFOs. I said, what's CAFO? Nobody knew what a CAFO is. Later I figured out. Concentrated Animal Farm Operations. We used to call this double speak, where you can't figure out what they're really talking about. Concentrated, you would think, oh, you know, so many animals in one place, it's more efficient, more meat per acre. But that animal is depending on the cutting down on the Amazon for the soil. The footprint of intensive factory farming is huge. It's not the square acreage of the prison in which the animals are kept. It's all the land that has to be taken over for fodder. There were studies done, I remember, about 20 years ago, showing that for the rich countries, the acreage they required outside their countries for animal feed was 7 times their acreage. Which is why India grows soya bean to export as animal feed. Brazil is growing soya bean to export as animal feed. Argentina is growing soya bean to export as animal feed, and increasingly it's all Roundup resistant soya bean. The destruction is a joint destruction of the economic base through which we produce our daily needs, as well as the political base of freedoms through which we produce in freedom and choose in freedom. For me, democracy is nothing more and nothing less than the ability of people to decide the conditions of their life. What food they eat, what seeds they'll grow, what freedoms they will have. And the reason I talk about the current corporate-dominated globalized world order as the death of democracy is because those are precisely the freedoms being taken away. There are 3 agreements of the WTO that compelled me to start the movement, 9 seeds. I was invited in 1987 to a conference on biotechnology in Geneva on the basis of my book on the Green Revolution. And there weren't that many people who had done study of what the Green Revolution actually did to ecosystems and to farmers. What you had is a lot of promotion and propaganda, how it was a miracle that brought India out of starvation and of a ship-to-mouth existence, and Norman Borlaug, who just passed away, created miracle seeds that increased production. On the ground, that increased production was only because more acreage was put under the rice and wheat, not because there was anything miraculous about it. The new varieties were designed with only one objective: to use more chemicals. And that's why even the United Nations said these are high response varieties, they should not be called high yielding varieties. And this myth of high yield continues also with what is called the second green revolution, and is basically the genetic engineering revolution. Every advertisement of the biotech industry tells you how without them we cannot feed the world. If I hadn't made a commitment to be here with you today, I would have been in Rome at a high-level meeting on the food crisis. And of course, Monsanto is very present at these meetings, saying how without them there will be no food, people will go hungry. Our studies in India have shown actually that the GM cotton is producing less. Monsanto's figures are 1,500 kilograms per acre. The average output of farmers is 300 to 400 kilograms. There's a new study out for the United States. It's based on 20 years of performance, because that's how long these GM crops have been around, under trial as well as under commercial planting. And for those who want to look at it, it's produced by the Union of Concerned Scientists. The author is Doug Sherman. And the title of the report is Failure to Yield. He has just taken official data, and it turns out that the GM technology has not contributed to yield at all. The yield performance is related to traditional breeding, conventional breeding. The only thing this new technology has done is given us the ability to put more toxics into crops. Either as herbicide-resistant crops, so you can spread more Roundup, or as Bt toxin crops, where you put the poison into the plant and now make it a pesticide factory that's constantly producing toxin. We did studies on what is it doing to soil organisms. 30% soil organisms disappeared in 4 years of cultivation. 30%. In 10 years, all these amazing bacteria and fungi that give us the real fertility would be killed by this toxin. There's a very famous Cornell study that showed that butterfly were being killed, the monarch butterfly study. And of course, these companies now have so much power, they control most universities. And the moment a scientist does an independent study, they go for him or her to make sure they're thrown out of their job. I've been doing this work on GM now for 20 years, and every dear friend of mine has lost a job. The only reason I haven't, I gave it up in 1982. So there's no job they can take away from me. They can't take away my mother's cow shed that she left to me from where I started the research foundation. Corporate globalization in its current form is becoming a dictatorship. It is not allowing either us to make our decisions in freedom, nor is it allowing our governments to respect the will of the people. Let me just give you 2 or 3 examples. A farmer is supposed to be able to choose the seed they grow. Nature has given such abundance of crops. We used to eat 8,500 crops before the industrial agriculture started to narrow the base. And in each crop we had tremendous diversity. I know the diversity in my country, 200,000 rice varieties. The movement in Afghania has saved 3,000. We've saved varieties that grow as tall as this roof to survive a flood in the Ganges Basin. Varieties that can grow in the salt and survive the cyclones in the coastal areas. We distributed them after the tsunami. Varieties that can tolerate the drought and still give you food. That diversity is what farmers have bred, what they've shared freely, especially women farmers. Women have been the seed keepers throughout history. And overnight, 1995, the World Trade Organization's trade-related intellectual property rights agreement takes that right away. Why is it such a mouthful, trade-related intellectual property rights agreement? Because first of all, intellectual property is a fraud in itself. How can you have property in products of the mind? And to imagine that soybean and corn is popping out of Monsanto's head when Monsanto doesn't have a head. It's a legal fiction. The companies are a legal fiction. But they are given a legal personhood. And then through the legal personhood, they're given an intellectual property. Products of the mind. Did they create those seeds? No. They added a toxin. Normally in society, we would make the polluter pay for adding pollution. In this case, they've manipulated the laws to be rewarded for pollution. When this intellectual property rights law was being negotiated, my government said, no, you cannot have this in a trade treaty. We have to be free to decide what patents we accept, what will be the length of a copyright. This national systems must decide, it must be a sovereign decision, which means it must be democratically shaped. And in fact, India's patent laws were designed after, we used to have imperial laws of 1911, which looked exactly like what you have now. But in 1970, we got a new patent law after 15 or 20 years of a public debate. In every school, every university, every small business, every big business to decide what would work for India. 2 things were excluded. You could not patent anything in agriculture because it was about life. And in medicine, you could only patent a method, not the medicine itself. Which is why India is such a big producer of generic drugs and low-cost drugs. The same AIDS medicine that is sold here at 25,000 rupees is sold in India for $25,000 is sold in India for $200. The same retroviral. There's a cancer medicine that's sold in India for also $200, 10,000 rupees for a month of treatment. And Novartis's cancer drug costs 125,000 rupees. And Novartis is suing us to say you cannot restrict patents to genuine innovation. You've got to let us have a monopoly. Exactly what Monsanto says. Whether or not we actually bred the seed, it's ours, if we took a patent. Monsanto went on record in 1995 after the WTO came into force and said in shaping this intellectual property law, and because of the fact that it shouldn't have been trade related, the Washington lawyers just came and put TR before IP and said now it's trade related by definition, so it has to be part of WTO. Monsanto went on record to say, in making this agreement, we were the patient, the diagnostician, and the physician all in one. We defined the problem. The problem was farmers saved seeds. We offered a solution, and And the solution was it should be illegal for farmers to save seeds. That's what made me worried in 1987 when I saw the intellectual property rights text that they were working on. That this basic freedom of farmers, which is also a duty, because not just a freedom to save seeds, it's a duty to save seeds. After all, what is seed but the embodiment of life and culture? And we've received it from hundreds and thousands of years of evolution, both human, cultural, and ecological. And it has to be passed on for the future. I see any attempt at seed monopoly as a criminal attempt, as a crime against nature, crime against cultures. And of course it encourages crimes against cultures. Because once you can assume that you have a mind and others don't, which is exactly where this comes from, you can also then assume you can take all the innovation of the third world countries and declare it to be yours. There have been crazy situations where a yellow bean from Mexico was brought across the border and patented in America, who then told the Mexicans, sorry, you cannot export it to us. It's my monopoly now, pay me a royalty. Ayahuasca, a healing plant of the Amazon, was patented. In India, lots of crops, and because we have the rich culture of Ayurveda, and all of this is in written text. You know? All our Ayurveda is in writing, so it's very easy for anyone to pick up a text, pretend that they innovated, write an application, and do you think those poor patent inspectors know all of Ayurveda, all of indigenous knowledge? They can't possibly. So they actually think, oh my goodness, this must be an innovation. So in 1984, I started a campaign called No More Bhopals, Plant a Neem. Because you remember the Bhopal disaster that killed 3,000 people in one night and has killed 30,000 people since then. And the women of Bhopal are continuing their struggle for justice. They will be back in Delhi on 2nd of December to ask for justice. And we didn't need a pesticide plant that would kill because we have a tree called neem, which is a natural pest control agent. So I would take these little neem saplings all over the country, distribute them, no more Bhopal's plant a neem. We don't need poisons. 1994, a patent is taken on the neem. Took that challenge on. And interestingly, this was the time when the US government was very active in shaping the World Trade Organization and was telling everyone, government has no business to be in business. But the patent on neem was jointly held by W.R. Grace and the USDA. Just as much as the patent on Terminator, the creation of sterile seed, is a joint patent of the USDA, Delta and Pineland, which is now owned by Monsanto. The idea that you will make seeds sterile so people are forced to come and buy every year. We fought the neem case 11 years and we won. And I remember a particular day where the lawyer said, she cannot be here because this is the European Patent Office and she's an Indian. So I just smiled at them. I said, in which case you can't be here either because you're not European, you're Americans. And suddenly they realized, because the racism is so deep that an American company can be in Europe and treated as they're called. How dare an Indian woman come and challenge us? And of course, eventually on 8th of March, it was 2004, we had the final decision, and the judges repealed that patent. My valley is famous for an aromatic rice called the basmati. You have a company in Texas called Rice Tech, and they really think you just put the word tech against anything and suddenly it's technology and no more nature, no more culture, no more people. Rice Tech patented the basmati and said this is our invention, the height of the plant, the breadth of the grain, the aroma in the rice, even the methods of cooking. My grandmother taught me that when I was 6 years old. And basmati grows in Dehradun. So we took that case on, and it's a wonderful campaign because I fought it legally also through the Indian Supreme Court instructing the government of India, but we also fought it at community level. I came to churches in Texas And we had this postcard campaign which said to the USPTO, you are the US Patent and Trademark Office. If you don't repeal this patent, you will have to be renamed the United States Piracy and Theft Office. And when thousands of postcards bombarded them, it actually worked. They were forced to repeal. We won another case against Monsanto patenting an ancient Indian wheat variety, not genetically engineered. It's taken of a low gluten wheat. Because as you know, so many people have gluten allergies. I've now launched a new campaign because all the climate resilient crops, all those drought resistant, flood resistant crops are now being patented. Because in the world of climate havoc, these companies know if they have seed monopolies, not only will they be able to sell it, but they'll be able to sell it through aid, they'll be able to sell it through government. It's a guaranteed market. And our campaign basically says, climate resilience is people's innovation, it's farmers' innovation, it's women's innovation. It has to be kept in the commons as a common defense for common resilience to climate change. And I'm so pleased that yesterday, a woman economist from Indiana University got the Nobel Prize for her work on the commons. We've had 2 decades of this perversion that everything on this planet has to be privately owned by corporations, and all of us should be paying them royalties and rents. Her getting a Nobel shows that even at that level, they're getting a sense that something is wrong with the world order and the world as I it. By the way, when I wrote Staying Alive, I ended, at the end of it, Chipko had received the alternative Nobel Prize that year, and the Nobel Economic Prize had gone to an economist called Solow, who said, there's no ecological crisis. For everything that we run out of, we can create it again. The technology will solve it. And all scarcity will be overcome by competition and economics. For that same economic prize to now be given for the celebration of the commons is a major shift. And it's taken place because movements, societies created another discourse. We create the context of our freedoms. The death of democracy is intimately linked to killing economies. Economies that are killing the planet with climate change, but economies that are physically killing people through climate disasters. But these seed monopolies have pushed Indian farmers into such deep debt that they've started to commit suicide on a very large scale. 200,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide since 1997 when these policies came into force. Most of these suicides are concentrated in the area where cotton is grown, and in most areas where cotton is grown, it's now genetically engineered BT cotton monopolized by Monsanto. So we've started, 3 years ago I did a seed pilgrimage through the suicide belt, because we were counting the suicides, and beyond a point I said it's not enough. It's not enough to count. We've got to build the alternative. And I have been building the alternative of creating community seed banks so that seed stays in the commons, spreading organic farming so that farmers don't lose their incomes buying toxic chemicals and non-renewable seed, and helping set up direct marketing systems for farmers. So we got into the cotton area, and we called it the Seeds of Hope. Started seed banks, helped farmers go organic. Farmers' income increased 10 times. We went from killing economies to living economies. But not only did we go from killing economies to living economies, we also simultaneously created living democracy. Because with every seed that the farmer can save, with every seed that the farmer can choose to grow, the farmer is sowing seeds of their freedom. We have a wonderful campaign for children. We distribute these little kits called Seeds of Freedom, in which we explain through the seed what's happening to the seed. And then we ask children to create gardens and be custodians of the seed. And the children respond to it with such amazing responsibility. Little children think it's not too much of a burden to grow a seed and take care of it. And Monsanto would have us believe that human beings are too lazy to take care of the seed. And they can sell us laziness through Roundup, non-renewable seed, Terminator technology. All of what we call progress today is the selling of laziness and irresponsibility. Don't do the work of caring, don't do the work of nurturing, don't do the work that grows things. Participate in destruction because you can just spray the poison. They actually have an ad for Roundup in South India that I've seen painted on a village wall. A woman's hands tied up with weeds. And it says, liberate yourself, use Roundup. As if the fodder she collects from the field is a prison. As if the greens she gets rich with vitamin A and rich in iron and brings to her children, or the medicinal plants that grow in the fields, that all of this is an imprisonment. And Roundup is liberation. Living democracy is in our hands to create. And living democracy, in my view, is not a luxury anymore. I have called it Earth democracy, because Earth democracy, for me, is recognizing that first and foremost, we are citizens of the earth, we are children of the earth. That's our first identity. That identity has been robbed from us. It's been robbed by either making us believe we are members of religions and then pitting religions against each other, or we are members of nations, pitting nations against each other, or the worst, we are just inhabitants of a global supermarket. All you have to do is shop to know who you are. But we are now shopping our way to death, because we are participating through that shopping in the killing economies. There's a filmmaker who made a film on Walmart. And then he realized that he has to figure out how things are so cheap in Walmart. So he went to China to figure out how blue jeans become so cheap when made in China. And he's filmed in this factory where when the order comes from Walmart, girls must stay awake for 36 hours in a row. If you drop off to sleep for 5 seconds, that day's wages cut. The documents are all with the factory owner. This is slavery. Blue jeans are cheap because of slavery. So there's a film made partly on my wonderful relationship with Monsanto, who a few years ago gave me a bullshit award for starving the world with organic. And I thanked them. I said, I call it cow dung and it still makes good compost. And a Swedish filmmaker decided to make a film on all of this and my constant dialogue with Monsanto, and they called it bullshit. It was being screened at a film festival, and this American filmmaker's film it's called China Blue, the film is called China Blue, was also being screened. And just in conversation I said to him, I said, you know, you need a third film to show how the cotton that goes into the blue jeans is so cheap. It's cheap because you're killing the farmers. And he's made it. It should be released next year. And I think it'll be a powerful film because he's worked with us, he's lived in those communities, and he's followed a family through. Cheap is another name for the death economy, because everything is being sold at a price lower than the cost of production. Everything is being sold at a price lower than what the producer needs to maintain their lives, whether it's a farmer, or it's a factory worker, or someone in a factory farm, in these animal factories. You cannot survive within that economy. But the fuel of all of that is reducing us to be consumers. Buy cheap. And then we vote in support of that economy rather than organizing for a living economy. That's the challenge we have today. The challenge we face today is to take joy in making the effort. When people say, but isn't it hard? Isn't it difficult? And I say, you know, everyone should go through the lesson of changing babies' nappies. It's tough. have to get up in the middle of the night and change a nap. It's not easy. But you feel fulfilled. That you're not letting your baby lie in shit. For a mother to get up 10 times and feed the baby, I'm a mother. You know, that hard work is joyful work. We've been made to forget work. We've been made to forget our creative aspects. This entire fossilized mind defined work as drudgery. You see, we've got to reduce drudgery. So spread Roundup. Got to reduce drudgery. Have TV meals that you throw into a microwave. All this is about reducing drudgery, and the word drudgery took away from us our creative ability. I was introduced to your beautiful organic garden by Tessa. Now those of you who work there, do you find it drudgery or do you find it stimulating? When you work with the soil, your hands speak to the cosmos. When you work with the soil, you are creating with nature. That's why my latest book is called Soil Not Oil. We've lived in an oil world, oil being only in a few places, only powerful people can control it. They will fight wars for it. But it's running out. In any case, it's putting too much carbon dioxide in the air. It's giving us climate havoc. This organization is over. The soil gives us another hope and another role, because the oil economy is what turns us into consumers. An oil-based economy, by necessity, makes Cargill the producer of fertilizers, because fossil fuels is what produces chemical fertilizers. But when we work with the soil, each of us is working with the earthworms and the mycorrhizae to create soil fertility. We begin building the soil. We are not mining the soil, we're builders of the soil. And as we build the soil, we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere. The soil is the biggest carbon sink on this planet. It's been treated as an empty container. The soil is a living system from which all life arises. And the more robust it is, the more we work to make it more living, and we actually can give life to the soil through our efforts in composting, in manuring, that much more the soil will produce. Our work in Navanya shows you can produce more food, working with nature. The idea that you have to be at war with nature to produce food is another obsolete idea. That you've got to spray war chemicals, you have to apply war chemicals as fertilizers. It's a fossilized idea whose days are over. Unfortunately, if any of you know Mr. Gates, please go tell him. He's supporting the wrong idea. He's got this huge project called Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. Green Revolution is proven to be a failure in India. And he wants all of Africa to be sprayed with fertilizers and spread with GMOs and non-renewable seeds. At a time where everyone knows there are alternatives, better alternatives that produce more food, protect the biodiversity, protect the climate, conserve the water, and give livelihoods. And livelihoods that are not boring. Every time people justify the destruction of small farmers and the genocide of small farmers, they talk about it as liberating them from hard work. And I always ask them, do you have a garden? They say yes. I said, do you like to work in your garden? Oh, it's wonderful. I said, how come it's wonderful for you? And it's oppressive for the farmer for whom it is a livelihood. I have not seen to date a third world peasant who hates working the land. They find their meaning in working the land. A tribal once said in India, when he was going to the field, he didn't say, I'm going to work in the field. He said, I'm going to beautify the earth. Because the work of working with nature as co-creator is about working with the beauty of the earth. And we've been given this ugliness as progress. It's time to be able to trust our own senses. We know deep in our heart what's beautiful and what's ugly. We know deep in our hearts which are the relationships that nurture and which are the relationships that deplete. We know through our experience which are the systems that are killing this planet and killing our societies. We have a choice. We have a choice to say no to these killing economies and dead democracies. We have a choice to create living economies and living democracy. It's in our hands, it's in our communities, it's not far away somewhere else. And I trust history. Every time people have decided they want to change and they work on it. They don't beg for it, but they work on it. The change will come sooner or later. Thank you.
We're opening up the question and answer session. I'm Melinda Harold-Menzies. I'm an associate professor of environmental studies here at Pitzer. I get my 2 minutes. Dr. Shiva has actually changed my life without her actually knowing. I read Staying Alive when I came back from the Peace Corps, probably in 1990, a year after it came out, and I still teach it in my gender, environment, and development class. And it completely changed my life. I had been a literature and mathematics major, and so I was thinking about grad school in mathematics or in literature, and somehow I ended up going in environmental studies, so it completely changed what I was doing. And since I'm running the question and answer session, I'm going to start with the first question. Sorry for being so rude. Dr. Shiva, many of our students in their academic careers are also very much engaged in activists, and you spoke about how you got involved with the CHIPCO movement when you were a student. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about your own engagement with how you became an activist, because you are a physicist, you're a particle physicist, at least by academic training. And I'm just very interested, I think our students would be very interested, how you've kind of emerged, I guess it's not merging, because I assume you're not practicing, you're a practicing particle physicist right now, but you know, where your activism came from, and it came to you, I guess, as a student.
I think the root of all activism is a deep caring and a deep love. And I love the forests of the Himalaya because I'd grown up there, and when CHIPCO happened, and CHIPCO started, I volunteered in the movement because it pained me to see the forest disappear. I used to feel a physical pain. I remember a particular trip I made. I wanted, before I went for my PhD to Canada, I wanted to visit all my favorite places, all the streams I had swum in, all the forests I had walked. The forests were gone, the streams were gone. And then I decided that I would give my time to protecting the forests, and somewhere in a tea shop someone said, oh, there's been a CHIPCO action. And then I went to that village, found out, met the activists, met the organizers, and spent the next few years working to stop the logging till 81. For that early period, it was sort of, you know, holidays. I was a volunteer, and the rest of the time I was doing my research. And 1982, I was invited by our Ministry of Environment to do a major study in Doon Valley, which is my valley. I was at that point in Bangalore, in the institute, in a national institute out there. And because it was my valley, of course, I accepted the challenge and did the study, and that study led to the closing of the mines. It was mining of limestone. And again, we did it in a participatory way, you know. For the government, the big worry was the mountains were becoming degraded. And it's a tourism spot, so they said tourism will be high. And Indira Gandhi had passed a statement saying the queen of the hills is becoming naked. So they were worried about the looks. I went to the villagers and said, what's the real problem? And the women said, water. And I had to change the terms of reference because for the government, environmentalism was looking green. For the women, ecology was the aquifer that those limestone deposits provided. If you've seen, in limestone rock, you have these huge cavities in which the water stores. And the Supreme Court of India stopped the mining. It was the first legal case which said, if commerce destroys ecosystems, then commerce must stop because ecosystems are, healthy ecosystems are vital for maintaining life, and the state has a duty to protect the life of its citizens under an Article 21, which is called the Right to Life article. And then I realized one little study can go so far, so I should give a little more time, take a little time off my academic work. So I founded the Research Foundation. At that point thinking for a 10-year period. In 1982 I started the foundation. 1984 we had the Bhopal disaster and the Punjab violence. Of very serious extremism in Punjab. 6 times more than 9/11, 30,000 people killed. And the Green Revolution was introduced to Punjab. The Green Revolution got a Nobel Peace Prize. And I said, this is not peace, there's war in Punjab. So what happened? What was this Green Revolution? Fortunately, I could address these issues in innocence. Not with a conditioned mind. Not with the propaganda of the Green Revolution. So when I saw water go, I saw water go. When I saw saline soils, I saw saline soil. If I saw indebted farmers, I saw indebted farmers. And I wrote that book for research. 87, as I mentioned, was when I was invited to this meeting where the biotech industry laid out how by the year 2000 there'd be 5 of them controlling all seed and all health, all seed, food and health through genetic engineering and patents. And that's when I decided I would save seeds to save freedom. My 10 years have long gone. I sometimes, when I sit quietly and have time to dream, I think at 60, I might just go back to the puzzles of quantum theory, if my brain can still deal with the challenges, because it's tough, it's very tough.
I'm taking my senior seminar in politics, and our topic is global poverty, and we keep on having this debate over, while we hope there's these people in the world who out of the kindness of their heart will do these really great things for us, and this really great things for the world, we know that it's really sad that we live in this capitalist society and that the best people in the world really want to be paid. And we recently had a debate about patents and how medicine patents are really important sometimes. And there was a debate about this. Some people said kind of what you said, and some people said that it was important to have patents because it attracts the best doctors. And how do we keep on getting the best doctors if we don't have patents? And I guess my question to you is how do we do that? How do we keep on getting the best people if we don't have an economic incentive for them? Even though we can hope that there's these really great people out there.
Well, the first thing is the best people don't do good work because of an economic incentive. A good doctor is a doctor because they want to heal. Yeah. In any case, doctors are not the ones who do research on medicine. Doctors get the medicine and give it to patients. There are scientists in universities who do that work. Most patents in medicine, the work was done in a university through public researchers, paid by public money. A company picked it up, took the patent. Just like neem, the use of neem, my grandmother and her grandmother had worked it out. But it was Grace and the USDA that took the patent. I can cite you 2 or 3 examples very quickly. There's a breast cancer gene patent. Now the work on the breast cancer gene was actually done by a scientist, woman scientist called Dr. King. The patent is held by a Utah company called Myriad Genetics, which takes a royalty for every test. Not for the treatment, for the testing. By and large, 90% patents are in the hands of those who never did the innovation, who just picked it up. There's patents on AIDS. The doctor who did the work on AIDS blocking, on spreading of the infection, he never wanted a patent. He did it in the public domain. A company took it. And then the companies prevent the original researchers from carrying on their work without paying them a royalty. In my view, the worst case, and I think this made a difference to India's patent law because I brought this person, I think his name was also Mike Moore, not the filmmaker, his name was Mike Moore. And he had cancer of the spleen, and he was in the University of California Medical School. And the doctor, by the way, the doctor's name was called Dr. Gold. And Dr. Gold found an interesting protein in his blood and took the patent and made the patient sign a paper. The poor patient is about to die, doesn't know what is happening to him. Later he realized that his own doctor had taken a patent on his cell line. It's called the Mo cell line. It was then sold, I think, to Ciba-Geigy for $30 million. Ciba-Geigy since then has made lots and lots of money selling this protein. So this idea that healing won't happen, and I was part of a debate in the European Parliament when the patent rules were being changed. Now remember, the pharmaceutical industry, which is the same as the agrochemical industry, which is the same as the biotech industry, they're not different. They had paid people to come and stand outside the parliament with billboards that said, no patent, no cure. But fortunately, there was enough evidence to show that most cures were coming outside the patent system. And in fact, patents create such a huge monopoly that they rob people of the access to medicine, which is why the AIDS activists of South Africa organized and fought in the WTO, and the WTO was forced to issue a public health declaration to say patents can not come in the way of the right to health. So it's not a settled issue, and my own sense is that the false assumptions and false correlations on the basis of which these monopoly patents were taken, that as more people study it, as more people experience it, the mythology is kind of dropping. And the reality is coming through. And the issue of medicine and seeds staying as public goods and staying as common goods is becoming not just a popular opinion, but as the Nobel Prize shows, it's becoming the recognized academic opinion.
Question? Is that a hand back there? Yes. With glasses? Do you have a question?
Sort of, I guess.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
I'm majoring in one of those engineers in the background.
Speaking so softly, impossible to hear you.
Okay. I'm going to be an engineer. Right now I'm kind of annoyed that anything I think is going to be snapped up by somebody else. I suppose my question is, how much of these destructive phenomena that you've so eloquently listed in the past hour is the result of cultural / civilizational issues, and how much is the result of human wants to power, superiority, whatever, in a more, less, I suppose, nature versus nurture argument? If the economic and political situations of the third world and the first world today were reversed, would we still be talking about the same things, just with some of the names changed? Monsanto becomes, say, Tata Memorial Biotech Incorporated.
Well, I don't think there's anything natural about greed. Greed is deliberately cultivated. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had indigenous cultures which don't have greed. You have enough diversity in human society to show that in some greed, just like in certain kinds of careless gardening, you will have more weeds. And in careful gardening, without the spraying of Roundup, you can control the weeds non-violently. Greed is a bit like that. If you allow the context for some people to take more than their share, then they will take more than their share. And then to define that as a natural trait of all human beings, I think is very, very flawed. For that, I would then say yes, particular cultures, particular civilizational traits promote certain kinds of societies. And when I talk about Earth democracy, I'm talking about the need to make a civilizational shift. Except now, for the first time, we need to make it collectively across the planet. It's not enough to make this shift in one country or two countries, both because economically we are now totally integrated, and change in one place will not be enough. But also ecologically, at the planetary level, we are too deeply integrated. So we have to think of ourselves as an integrated Earth community and build the kind of cultures of caring, build the kind of cultures of the commons, build the kind of cultures that allow sharing and more equitable sharing. It's totally doable, which is why I've started on our farm, in Dehradun, on our ecological farm, and also our seed bank. In fact, if you go there right now, you'll see 560 rices growing. One little space, in a space as big as this room. I've started a school of the seed. It's called the Beej Vidyapeeth. And the school of the seed is really to nurture cultures of abundance through sharing, because we've been made scared. We feel if we give, we are poorer. When the reality is, when we give, we are enriched. When we share, we are enriched. And we definitely need to not have the experience of a tiny group of people take away the experience of 6 billion human beings. There is so much wealth of knowledge and wisdom out there that needs to reshape the future trajectory for human beings.
Yes. Hi there. My name is Daniela. I think we're faced with a particular situation here. I know from myself growing up in Los Angeles and then being lucky enough to travel a lot of the world throughout my 20s. I think that we're devoid of maybe because it's been some generations of this kind of commercial farming. I know with my grandparents, they have some remembrances of a past where they were somehow linked with the natural world, but given that we've been such an extreme capitalist culture for a number of generations, we're kind of in a situation right now where we really, which I'm sure you're aware of, but I feel like we really need to learn from people who have that connection and all those knowledges at hand from their experiences, and that it's a lot of the times backwards where we're kind of obviously in a lot of control and dominating in the world as a country. It's almost like spoiled children or something like that. So I just wonder if you have any thoughts, if you know what I mean. I think when you grow up around the nature, and the nature can affect you and give you this kind of understandings that you talk about, remembering a time when the rivers flowed and then they were gone. And if we grow up without that, how do we kind of attain those knowledges to understand how to live a more balanced way, if that makes sense? Yeah.
Well, I definitely think learning is an issue that can take you anywhere in the world. And that's why we welcome very much people to our School of the Seed. And at any point, I have at least 5 young people like you, just learning how to do organic farming, learning how to work with their hands again. Just the basic skills of working with the land and with the soil. But ultimately, as we were talking, Tessa was saying just as we entered this building, your work is here. You can have an experience anywhere else. You can have solidarity on a planetary scale. But your responsibility is to make a change here. And the stage at which things are now, they are giving way. The economic crisis showed us that the financial system is giving way. It's been held up with $3 trillion bailout, otherwise it will have collapsed. The food system is giving way. It cannot continue on the present path. It cannot continue with the present levels of concentration and even deeper concentrations. So we have to build an alternative, and it won't come from the top. It has to grow from the bottom. And it will need ingenuity. It will need a lot of innovation, non-patented innovation, creative genius to figure out how do you rebuild a local economy? How do you rebuild a local food economy? And I know lots of young people. I've been very involved with the California students for sustainability and the initiatives they've been taking on relocating their food systems in the local level, because as you know, there's the prison firm that serves you all food, or at least in the universities it does. What's its name? The name, it's a Marriott subsidiary. But they're the same guys who learned expertise on how to serve food in large numbers in the prisons and then moved to the campuses. Yeah, that's it, Sodexo. But you know, I had a wonderful sandwich at the student-run cafe. Why can't all campuses have cafes like that? And you worked, you got it, and this can grow.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, my leg is bad. I just can't stand.
I think they can pass you a microphone.
Pardon me for sitting. My leg is a little out under the weather too. Dr. Shiva, I would like if you could talk a little bit about how the movement that you described in India, that you've been a part of for such a long time and done such wonderful work. How does it find political expression within the society? I mean, because here our tendency is to look in some ways for small and individual solutions. We don't have kind of political, we have a history of it, but it's kind of been dead for a while, of real intense political fervor in some of the areas that you described in India, like the Punjab. I mean, there are tremendous political movements that are going on in that region that are fighting back against really the imperialists that are basically trying to put this green revolution forward. So how within a society does this movement resonate among the political groups within the society and that kind of thing?
You're asking about this country?
Yeah, I'm talking about India. Yes.
Okay. Well, you know, the same processes which allow big agribusiness, big biotech industry to hold White House captive and the USDA captive and the Food and Drug Administration captive are trying to hold our government captive. I remember I used to train my government on biosafety issues, and then when Monsanto came into the country and started the corruption, I had to sue both Monsanto and our government, regulatory agencies, for not following the law, not obeying the law. But on the other hand, there are times where I sit on government committees, I sit on the National Organic Board, which sets organic standards, I sit on biodiversity committees that write laws on biodiversity protection. Because India is a land, most people don't realize every fourth farmer is an Indian farmer. We are the largest body of living farmers. So of course, it turns into a major political mobilization in spite of the denial and in spite of the co-option, because 75% of the votes lie in the countryside. And we've been able to turn the farmer suicide issue into a political debate at every election. That doesn't mean that we expect Monsanto to just lay down and Cargill to just lay down and say, you know, we will not try and take over your market. They find new ways, and we have to keep going. I mean, besides having a lesson in changing nappies, I think all of us need a lesson in persistence. Nothing happens overnight. Good things grow slowly. Destruction is instantaneous. So let's not look at instant solutions to anything. Let's know that this is long haul. And we need to build the networks of solidarity. We need to build the movements that can sustain themselves and nurture each other over a long period of time. I think it's so vital to recognize that creation, growing, the real growth, is not instantaneous. Only horribleness can make happy.
I think you've had your hand up for a while. The young man in front of the woman with the microphone.
Hi, my name is Owen Schaefer. I'm actually a grad student over at Claremont Graduate University. I study positive psychology, and I've been researching directly democratic institutions like worker cooperatives, free schools, and local self-government. And I'm curious what role those kinds of institutions, like worker cooperatives, where it's a business but there's no hierarchy, everyone's on the same level, it's one person, one vote, kind of thing. I think that they were mentioned in that movie that just came out, Michael Moore's new one. What role do you think those directly democratic institutions like worker-run cooperatives will play in your vision of Earth democracy?
I think they have a very, very big role. They have a very big role because the reason we feel weak and powerless is because we have been taught to think of ourselves as isolated individuals in society. And the minute we can see ourselves as organized in community or in collective or in cooperative, suddenly new possibilities emerge. I built the food movement in India. We built it through a cooperative. We've created producer cooperatives. We have a giant sugar industry, but we brought artisanal sugar, organically grown artisanal sugar into the market. How could we do it? By putting 20 people together and saying, now you make the artisanal sugar. Each of you individually doesn't have the economic power to do it, or the social power. But you as a collective have the power. I don't know how many of you are aware that India is the biggest producer of milk in the world. And the entire dairy industry is based on producers as individual women, 1 cow, 1 goat, 2 buffaloes, and the distribution in the cooperative sector. The entire dairy industry of India is a cooperative arrangement, and it has survived the assaults of Nestle, it has survived the assaults of the entire subsidies of the rich countries. So I would say, if the fossilized culture gave us competition as the organizing principle, cooperation is the organizing principle of life and production.